Hello everyone, RVer Frank here with Kathy and Coco, and we are going off the beaten path west of Big Pine, California to explore the Glacier Lodge area up here by the Palisades Glacier as we pick up discovering more about the Palisades Basin. So come along, join us, and enjoy the ride and get a little feel of the past here. South of Mammoth Lakes, there are 8 paved roads that branch off US 395 and climb into the mountains. They are Convict Lake, McGee Creek, Rock Creek Road, District Creek, Highway 168, Glacier Lodge Road, the one we are on now, Onion Valley, Mount Whitney, and the Horseshoe Meadows Road. These, together with a number of unpaved roads, all ending at campgrounds and trailheads, from where various paths lead to westward to and beyond the Sierra Crest Trail, across part of Kings Canyon National Park, Inyo National Forest, and the John Muir Wilderness. When we look across California's alpine wonderland of meadows, lakes, and peaks, we know that there is one man who explored, camped, rambled, and climbed there more than anyone else: Norman Clyde. Norman Clyde was unreal, and his accomplishments are incredible. Once I became aware of this man, I, like many, can't get enough of collecting everything Norman Clyde. So in tribute to him, I present here a brief visual compendium of his undertakings from many sources I have researched, for the pleasure of old and new admirers of Norman Clyde. Open any of the climber's guidebooks to the Sierra, and you will scarcely find a page without at least one peak or route tagged "First Ascent by Norman Clyde." Look down the several generations of Euro-Americans who found fresh visions of life in the High Sierra, and the whole middle half of that legacy is dominated by Norman Clyde. Probably no other mountain range has its lore so entwined for so long with a single individual, and one can fairly ask if anyone has ever dedicated so much studied, vigorous leisure to a given terrain. Almost from his first full summer in the Sierra in 1914, when he hiked virtually the entire length of the range until his death in 1972, Norman Clyde's life was dominated by mountains, overwhelmingly in Sierra Nevada. The Sierra was his inspiration and his refuge and his home. As the rest of us find our transformative adventures, recreation, and moments of bliss on our vacations up there, it's hard not to ponder the astounding courage, endurance, tenacity, joys, and struggles of the man who was embedded in the Sierra for most of his adult life, decade after decade, with mostly the peaks, forests, streams, and wildlife as his companions. Norman Clyde's legacy makes us ask, how is it that a well-educated, fully capable man could commit most of his adult life to roaming mountains? What different stuff was he made of compared to the rest of us? Norman Clyde was endowed with the paradoxes of a full life. He was a disciplined intellectual who had the look and some of the manners of a tramp. He was a recluse who enjoyed the company of others, at least those who made his standard. And he was a skilled tracker, guide, and a natural leader. He was a linguist who sometimes didn't speak to another human for months at a time. He was a cantankerous grouch, and he was a storyteller full of laughter for the follies of most everyone, including himself. Most notably, he was a connoisseur and climber of peaks. To the majority of us who know life as a complex of often struggling engagements, and who know the high country as a blessed place for periodic visits, the person of Norman Clyde looks out from the Sierra Nevada granite as both an inspiration and an enigma.
That snow right there?
Kind of looks like it, doesn't
We'll show you some.
She's shivering. Put her down there. What'd she do? Oh, cool. Come here. Hi, Coco. She does know what's going on. I learned the details of Clyde's life are rather sketchy, both in and out of the mountains. I learned that he taught in a number of small schools in Central and Northern California. He remembers teaching near Stockton and spent a year each at Mount Shasta and Weaverville. From his mountaineering notes, he must have spent some time in Arizona. Sometime during this period, he married a young lady from Pasadena. It is known that they lived together for 3 years and that she passed away from tuberculosis. It is apparent that he felt a deep love for his bride, and undoubtedly her passing was a strong factor in shaping his character. In the field of mountaineering, he was in Yosemite in 1914, where he first met up with the Sierra Club, joining with them on a trip to Tuolumne. Clyde became a member of the club that year. After leaving the club outing, he traveled south along the backbone of the Sierra with a pack train run by Charlie Robinson, old-time Sierra packer. The trip ended at Lone Pine. Clyde made the first of his 50 ascents of Mount Whitney at this time. Clyde accompanied the Sierra Club on their trip from Yosemite through Evolution Valley in 1920, during which time he made several first ascents. It was on this trip that he carried the first of his famous big pack, leaving the valley a couple of days behind the Sierra Club and not knowing for sure whether he could catch up with the club. He took along sufficient food. He swung by Camp Curry, noticed a platform scale, and he weighed the pack at 75 pounds. The next night was spent with a survey crew that he had met on the trail. They seemed amazed at the size of the pack. At that time, Clyde weighed about 140 pounds and kept commenting about it. In the morning, one of the crew suggested that Norman might have trouble finding the pack train and suggested that he take along a few extra cans of food that they had. Another offered a couple of other items. As later companions were to find out, Norman never turns down free supplies, and the group kept offering him more, telling of the dangers of being caught in the wilderness without food. After they had loaded him down with an additional 20 pounds, he was allowed to go on his way. It was not until the next day that Clyde realized it had all been a gag to see how much he could carry. But it is still a question as to which side came out ahead with the gag. In the fall of 1924, Clyde was appointed principal of high school at Independence in Owens Valley. Situated at the foot of Mount Williamson, probably the most magnificent of all of the 14,000 footers, it was within easy driving distance of most of the approaches to the High Sierra. Every weekend he would lock up his school and dash off for the peaks. The record for 1925 shows that he logged 48 climbs, of which exactly half were first ascents. Only on 6 of the total number did he have a climbing companion. The following year, the number of ascents was boosted to 60. That is 60 that have been recorded. Norman was exploring the range at a rate far surpassed the records of Brewer, Clarence King, or John Muir. However, a number of townspeople were not so impressed by this record. Certainly, Clyde was an excellent instructor, and he controlled the wild youths of his mountain valley like they had never been controlled before. But a school teacher, especially a principal, was supposed to be an important man in the social and cultural life of the community. Then came Halloween of 1927. Rumor had it that the boys were going to play a prank on the school facility, and it seemed that these were not to be harmless pranks. Norman stationed himself nearby, armed with a .38 caliber revolver. As a carload of youths drove onto the school grounds, he challenged them. They refused to stop, so he fired a warning shot. Apparently, the rowdies believed that Clyde would be bluffed and kept on. He fired a second shot, which ricocheted fragments of lead into the car. The hoodlums left and soon were telling the story all over town, taking the whole thing as a huge joke. Not so their parents. They waited upon the sheriff and demanded a warrant for attempted murder. The sheriff turned down this request, saying that if Clyde had attempted murder, it would have been murder, as he was the best pistol shot in the country. Next, a request was made for a complaint charging illegal use of firearms. After a few days, Clyde resigned. All charges were dropped, and Independence had traded its most colorful principal for a teacher that would act as a teacher should act. No longer tied to regular employment, he plunged into a full-time study of the High Sierra. Within the next year, a large number of articles poured from his pen, including the well-known series of close-ups of our High Sierra that appeared in Touring Topics, now Westways, in the spring and summer of 1928. His summers were spent in climbing in the backcountry. At times, Clyde would guide parties to the summits of difficult peaks. During the winters, usually were spent serving as a caretaker at mountain resorts. Thus, he was able to hole in at such places as Glacier Point at Yosemite, Giant Forest at Sequoia, Parcher and Andrews camps on Bishop Creek, Glacier Lodge above Pig Pine, and at Whitney Portal. Many were the times that Clyde rescued lost or snowbound climbers, or if not called in time, located their bodies. His locating of wrecked planes has been the subject of numerous magazine stories. In the 1950s and 60s, he served as a caretaker at Glacier Lodge and a fishing cabin owned by Lon Chaney Sr. in the Palisades. During Norman's last years, he lived at the old Baker Ranch on Baker Creek near Big Pine, California. This was a primitive 3-room ranch house using kerosene lanterns and having running water because a stream flowed through the spring house. Much of the gruffness of his earlier years had disappeared, and his clear light blue eyes and pink, freshly shaven face gave him the appearance of an alpine gnome. He had said that he will continue to climb the Sierra until one day he will just forget to come back. The major peak directly west of Glacier Lodge is officially designated Norman Clyde Peak, and nearby there's a Norman Clyde Glacier. And there is a Norman Clyde minaret in the Mammoth Lakes area. Norman Clyde was born April 8, 1885 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He died December 23, 1972 at age 87 in Bishop, California. His resting place is at Norman Clyde Peak above Glacier Lodge in North Palisades.
Oh, there's a little brook right there. We could turn out right here and take some movies of that.
I think there was another.
See what this one is. There's one right here. Oh, look, this is a good place because you can get some of that little brook.
Well, this was fun, but it's time to say goodbye as we head on to our next Off the Beaten Path journey. Thanks for watching, see you soon, and have safe travel.